All right, welcome back, and here we are already somehow on day 5 of Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. We are halfway there at this point, with only 5 days remaining in the story overall as it has been written thus far. Let's start by talking about Szeth, some more information surrounding Szeth. We have this idea that Szeth has had this spren since a relatively young age, particularly since he used that rock to kill the soldier that was attacking him in that moment. That's when he says he first heard the spren, and it's followed him and spoken to him ever since. We also had some more background information on how rocks were potentially brought to Roshar from Ashen, from humans, when they originally came through the Elscaller portal. I'm just hearing myself talk right now. As they came through the portal to Roshar, that they brought rocks with them as little tokens of their home planet. I think it's funny because sometimes when I go and travel to like distant places on hikes or something, I might grab a rock and bring it back home with me. So it's a human tendency, apparently. Anyways, my point is that if Szeth has the spren, and the spren is said to be from the rock, and the rock is potentially from the home planet, then is Szeth's spren different fundamentally from all the other spren on Roshar? Is it a spren from the home planet of Ashen? Is his spren inherently outside the norm in this way? Is his spren able to know things or recall things? Is his spren able to influence him in ways that are abnormal because of this? Yet to be seen, but I'm just trying to put these pieces of the puzzle together. There's also some symbolism with Moses in the biblical sense with Szeth. A little bit, I'm catching up, I'm picking up on it here and there. We have Szeth, this peaceful young soul who has been torn away from his family, and I'm starting to see how now he's been pushed into being essentially raised by others higher in society. This is all some kind of Moses symbolism, particularly though whenever Szeth's spren is telling him during the flashback where he's trying to burn the ships of the invaders. The spren tells him to stab one man to send a message, and Szeth thinks for a moment and then he stabs 2. This reminds me of when Moses was told to speak to the rock, and instead he struck the rock with his staff. And there's some analogy and some metaphor there that goes, I would say, beyond the scope of this video, but to get to the point, it's from that point forward that Moses is not allowed to enter into the promised land. And I'm starting to get the sense that the same thing, in a way, happens to Szeth as he's exiled from his country, and he's no longer able to enter into some promised land that I don't think has been made fully apparent to us yet at this point in the story. But I'm just assuming that at some point it's going to be a bit of a mirage for Szeth, that, oh, everything's coming together. If I just follow this path, I'll be able to make it to where I want to be. And in the end, I think that that's taken away from him. So I'm seeing some foreshadowing here with the symbolism revolving around the biblical story of Moses. Not sure if anyone else picked up on that, but that's what I'm seeing. Another thing I wanted to mention about Kaladin and Szeth is how I've said multiple times that I see a lot of similarities between the two of them. Kaladin has been thinking the same, but then during part 5, he comes to the realization that as far as Kaladin is concerned, Szeth is less like him and more like Tien, because he sees Kaladin as this guy who at a young age was torn away from a peaceful life and made to fight and made to do things that he never would have wanted to do on his own. And if we think back to the vision that Kaladin had of Tien, Tien tells him, look, no one really made me go out with those boys on that mission where we all ended up getting killed. I did that voluntarily so that I would be with them, so that they wouldn't be alone in their final moments. And Tien really showed a lot of strength, a lot of courage in that. And so in some ways, I do see how Kaladin is seeing that Szeth is a lot like Tien. But at the same time, Kaladin is noticing, without really realizing it, that Szeth is a lot like his own projection of how he saw Tien. Kaladin has projected a lot onto Tien, especially over all these years, just thinking about him in memory. And Kaladin is seeing a lot of similarities between that projection and Szeth. And so The way that Szeth is not exactly like Tien, and it's not exactly like Kaladin's projection. But there are some similarities between the three of them. I just want to point that out, that Kaladin thinks of Tien in a way that has perhaps even influenced our own view of Tien. But I want to not forget that vision that he had of Tien that really showed Tien in a bit of a different light, not as this helpless child that was just thrust into this situation that he couldn't do anything about, but as someone who took on the responsibility of their own agency all the way up until their death, which really shows a lot of maturity from Tien. And he was young when he died, so I don't want us to discount Tien, and I want us to remember that about him. And as far as the Shattered Plains, we're getting some more information about how potentially the Stone Wards used a vast amount of power to liquefy the stone of the region, and then using what's called Cladni plates. Not using Cladni plates, but you can create this same sort of experiment with Cladni plates where you put sand on them and then have a frequency that results in particular geometric patterns. This was actually mentioned in the Stormlight Archives before. I think Yasna was the one who was starting to put the pieces of puzzles together, that maybe this is in some way how the Shattered Plains were created. Regardless, just some more information that backs that theory up, that perhaps they use these Stone Ward abilities to somewhat liquefy the surface and then use the songs of the singers or of the chasm fiends even, because it said that they have the ability to sing with like 4 voices at once and all this stuff. There's a lot of background information on the chasm fiends that I'm like, I don't really care about this right now. There's a lot more going on, but maybe in this way it plays a bit more into the overall story of how the Shattered Plains were created. So if you didn't catch that, I want to point that out. We get some more information around Renarin in the spiritual realm as he goes back to when the Heralds were first created or founded. And he is in the vision as Vedel, and Ishar tells him that he needs to be ready to accept the bond and take on honor. As we go on in that same vision, flashback, instance of the spiritual realm, we see that Mraize has actually entered this same vision as Tanavast, and they notice last minute that Tanavast is actually Mraize and have a battle within the spiritual realm. Shallan gets stabbed. She feels searing pain, and so there's the physical element to the vision in the spiritual realm, but I'm curious what would happen if, say, she died in a battle in the spiritual realm. Is it real? Would she then wake back up in her body? I guess in this way it's different from the visions that Dalinar had, because his body would stay in Roshar in the physical realm while he would go into the vision. But it was hinted by the book that the visions were of the spiritual realm. But what's different about this is now when they're going into the spiritual realm, they're physically going into the realm, as evident by previously in this same book when they were thrust into the spiritual realm. Gavinor even was taken and no sign of their physical body was left behind, like they physically went there. So I'm not exactly sure how the visions in the spiritual realm are related. Are they one-to-one, or are they just related in some other sort of vague way? Not entirely sure. Maybe we'll find out. I would say that maybe one of my favorite parts of Day 5 was the battle revolving around Adolin. I enjoy seeing Adolin getting to go out there and act as the Blackthorn's son in his own way, taking on this battle, being really fearless, pushing into the enemy lines to try to save the other man who had the other set of shard plate as they're trying to protect Azimir. And seeing Adolin just going all out is a good action sequence as he did everything he could to save this guy. Barely saves him. And in the end, an old friend from Shadesmar, Nodum, comes to help Adolin for the clutch save right at the end. So it was a good action sequence, a lot of good fighting going on there. As we wrap up Day 5, we, I think, can take a moment to step back and say, okay, where are we? We've got Dalinar, Navani, Shallan, Renarin, and R'Lain all in the spiritual realm, essentially using this as a vehicle to describe to us as the reader the events that took place to bring about the Heralds in the first place, but also in the present as a way for Dalinar to potentially find a way to ascend to honor, or to essentially take on the essence of honor so that he would be on a more level playing field when facing off against Odium on Day 10. So we can't forget that we're still on this countdown to that. That's the ultimate point that we're reaching at the end of this book, and we're supposed to be, is Dalinar facing off against Odium for their contract. Okay, so that's what's going on with them. We have Adolin fighting for, it's been multiple days now since he was waiting for troops to arrive to help back them up in Azamir, and it's been multiple days, but they were delayed. So delayed by how much, we're not exactly sure. So hopefully they'll be arriving soon to give him some relief, but he's been fighting he's been fighting his heart out, and he's been doing a good job. I mean, they've been holding it down, so they haven't fallen yet. We've got Sigil fighting, trying to protect on the Shattered Plains, because Odium wants to take that before the end of the 10 days is upon them. And who else do we have in the story? We're missing some more information around Lift. I'd like to know what Lift has been up to. She's always a good character to follow in this story. Yeah, and then of course we're following Kaladin and Szeth as they are going throughout Shinovar. And right towards the end of day 5, we saw how Nail has come back to accompany Kaladin and Szeth, and so getting to watch Kaladin and Nail interact, which I'm hoping will happen here in day 6, will be really entertaining. I'm assuming that would be really entertaining, watching them try to converse, and maybe even the 3 of them together trying to understand each other is going to be funny. We're getting more and more of this trope of Kaladin being this kind of stereotypical therapist for Szeth, and it's interesting, but it's all just kind of surface level, I would say. It's like, you know, Szeth, it wasn't your fault. And Szeth's like, oh, but it was my fault. No, it wasn't your fault. Oh, okay, maybe it wasn't. And, you know, it's just like, all right. It's like one of my qualms with the story is a lot of it's just kind of surface level, but overall, I think we stay on track with, describing what's going on, trying to unpack some of the metaphor, trying to make some predictions towards the end of the book, and just enjoying the process while we're here. And then, as I've said before, when it's all said and done, I'm gonna take some time to think it all over and give a retrospective view on the Stormlight Archives overall. I don't read a lot of fantasy, so in some ways I look forward to maybe taking some time to read some other fantasy to see how it compares. But this for me has been really my biggest journey into reading fantasy literature. Of course, I've watched things, you know, like I watched Game of Thrones, I watched Lord of the Rings. I really enjoy it. So I enjoy like the fantasy genre, but never before have I really read that much fantasy. So for me, this is an initial journey into the realm of reading fantasy. Anyways, I got a little off topic there. So that was day 5 of Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. We've only got 5 days to go. If you enjoyed this video, press like. I'll see you in the next video on the series when we cover day 6. As always, I appreciate your time watching. I'll see you in the next one.